Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome to the CUNY BA Research Skills mini course. My name is Ruijiao Dong, and I am one of the CUNY BA fellows. Before we start today, let me introduce to you some exciting events that are happening at CUNY BA. So first, we had a month of orientation events full of exciting things that happened around. Next, we're hosting the CUNY BA Research Skills mini courses, and today's workshop is one of them. After today's workshop, we will have another one, which is organizing your research paper with a thesis statement that is happening on Wednesday, February 15th at 10 a.m. Please check it out, register, and join us. Next, we will have the CUNY BA Student Showcase and Senior Day together this year, which is happening on May 12th, Friday at 1 p.m. Please come to the Graduate Center and join us with all the exciting things and share your journey at the CUNY BA with us. Okay, now let's start today's workshop about annotated bibliography. I'm sure that many of you have seen this term for quite several times, right? But maybe some of you don't understand like what is an annotated bib, or why do we have to write an annotated bib? It seems very redundant, it seems very unnecessary. So today we're going to address all that issues. But before we jump into the annotated bib, let's take a look at the bibliography. What is this, right? A bibliography is a list of sources. It can be books, journals, websites, periodicals, magazines, newspapers, or all that kind of stuff put together. It's a list that you compile together for a specific topic that you are researching into. Sometimes the bibliography are called references, or sometimes it's works cited, depending on the different citational styles that you are using or being required to use. So a bibliography is very simple. It only includes the citational information. For example, the name of the author, the title of the book, the publisher, the place of the publication, and the year of the publications, etc., etc. Here is a very simple sample of a bibliography. It's very simple. So it has books on it, it has articles on it, it has PhD dissertations on it. And if we take a look at this, maybe you can fathom like what this topic is, what is the field this bibliography is serving, right? So a bibliography is this kind of stuff. Next, what is an annotated bibliography? Sometimes for short, we just call it annotated bib. The difference between an annotated bib and the bibliography is annotation. So for annotation, usually we are doing three things, or we have to include three aspects of the things. First, we have to summarize the source, right? Summarize what's the main argument in this book or in this article. What is the point of this book? What topics are covered? Or what's the scope of this, right? Basically, the idea is if you don't have the book or the article right in front of you, and someone else asks you, did you read it, right? What's the book about? And can you repeat what's in the book to this person who's asking, right? Sometimes it can be very detailed, sometimes it can be very simple. It all depends on how long the annotation is and how your instructor or your professor requires. Okay. And the second part of the annotation you should do assess or evaluate, right? After summarizing the source, it will be very helpful to evaluate, is it a useful source? Is it reliable, right? who is the author, what's the credential, is this person a journalist, is this person a scholar, is this person a layperson, how does it compare with other sources in your bibliography, right? So basically you're trying to look at your source critically, right, and objectively, as a reviewer or as a critique. So you don't just simply repeat what's in the book or in the article. And the third part is reflect. So once you have summarized and evaluated the source, you need to ask, how can I use this source to better serve my own research, right? How does this book or article fit into your topic? Is this helpful to you, right? How does it help you to shape your argument, right? So basically, at this step, you're trying to establish a connection or try to find some contact points between your own research and the source that you are looking at. Sometimes when we write an annotated bib, we are required or we are asked to do all three kind of things, but sometimes it's only summarize and assess, sometimes it's only summarize and reflect. So it all depends on the specific instruction that you're getting from your professor for specific classes. So do remember to check it with your professor before you start working on your annotated bib for research. And sometimes it's really confusing to think about, why should we write about this? It seems very unnecessary. I already read the book, I already found the articles, and I can just use them, right? What's this step? What's the meaning of this step? So first, it's really helpful for you to learn about your topic. Sometimes it's an excellent preparation for a research project. When you're collecting all the information, when you're collecting all the different sources for a bibliography, sometimes you're just collecting, you're not thinking. But when you start to read more critically and more holistically, you start to, as I said before, you start to engage with your source. You start to perform as a researcher, as a scholar, to join and to participate in the conversation that these sources are formulated. And the second part, sometimes it is really helpful for you to formulate a thesis. I think many of us, or sometimes we have difficulties finding a debatable statement, which is a thesis or an argument that is good. Sometimes it's only because we are looking at these piles of things that we collected, but we're not analyzing them. So when you write an annotated bib, it usually is the starting point of analysis. When you engage with all the different authors and all the different sources, you start to think and you start to come up with that argument that your professor asked you to come up with. So it's really helpful and really crucially important in the process of researching. And sometimes we write annotated bib not for a specific research, but for a specific topic. And some scholars and some scholars publish annotated bib just to serve other scholars. So, for example, this one, an annotated bib of LGBTQ rhetorics. It's not specifically for any research or any research paper, but it's an annotated bib. So if you look at this annotated bib, there will be many books with annotations. So it saves you sometimes. So you don't have to read all the books on the list, but you can have some general idea about what this book is about, right? So it will be a form of knowledge distribution and dissemination, and it can be very helpful and vitally important for the scholarly community. So if you want to contribute to the community in some way, start to compile an annotated bib is a good point to start. All right, next let's take a look at some examples of the annotated bib. I'm turning my camera off. I'm not sure if you guys can still see me. I'm turning it off just to so my face doesn't block the text. Maybe we'll spend like 10 to 15 seconds just to look at it very quickly. All right. So what are the information that are included in this entry? First line, we see the name of the author, we see the title of the book, and we see the publishers and date, right? So basically, all the basic information are included. The first paragraph, we can just deduce that's summary, right? It says Lamont's book offers honest advice on the nature of a writing life, complete with its insecurity and failures. So that's very helpful sentence for us, right? We didn't read the book, but now we know it's about writing, and we can probably find some useful advice. And if we have insecurities and if we have encountered failures in terms of writing, we will probably see some useful scenes in this book. And we can also get some other information. For example, we see it's a humorous approach, so it's not a dense reading, it may be an easy read, right? Many other things. Second paragraph. So second paragraph, obviously the author of the annotation is assessing or evaluating the book. Is it useful, right? Is it valuable book, right? There says Lamont offers sane advice for those struggling with anxieties of writing, but her main project seems to be offering the reader a reality check regarding writing, publishing, and struggling with one's own imperfect humanity in the process. So, sane advice, that's evaluation, right? It's not crazy advice, it's not a fanciful advice, but it's sane advice. And the book is about, struggling with anxiety, and also her main project, the author of the annotation says, it can also offer the readers a reality check. So it says, the next sentence naturally says, rather than a practical handbook, this text is indispensable because of its honest perspective, its down-to-earth humor, and its encouraging approach. So basically, we can see the author of the annotation thinks this book is very useful in this and that way, right? And the third chapter, the third paragraph, we can probably deduce the author of this annotation is also a writer or a teacher of writing, right? So how can they use this book in their writing life and in their writing class? And so the author says, it can easily be included in the curriculum for writing class. Specifically, several of the chapters addresses the writing process and would serve to generate discussions on students' own drafting and revising process. So it's very specific and very useful. You can, if you are also a writing teacher, you can just open this book, go to the part 1 and see those chapters and see if you think all these, the discussions can also be generated likewise. So this annotation is very standard and very good annotation that covers all three aspects that we just talked about, right? It's a summary, the assess, and the reflection. There's another sample that I offered you guys. It's shorter, and so it doesn't include the reflection part. I will leave it here so you can just take a look of the details of this annotation on your own. But you can also try to see for which sentence, for which part, the author of the annotation is doing what. Okay. I have another sample for you guys, which is even shorter. Basically, it only includes the summary of the source. So the length of the annotation really depends on how how your professor requires, for the length and for the scope of their annotation. Next, maybe you can do a fun exercise together. So I have another example. I have another sample of the annotation, and I have numbered all the different sentences in this paragraph. So maybe just on your own, you can write down the number and the things. Try to think about, for example, the sentence number 2. In this article, Trevor et al. Reviewed the influences of paying and job opportunities in respect to job performance, turnover rates, and employee motivations. So what is the purpose of this sentence? Or what is the function of this sentence in terms of in terms of the annotation? Okay, maybe it's a summary, maybe it's an introduction of the book, maybe it's evaluation of the book. I don't know. Do this on your own. Do this practice on your own. Write them down, and you can just pause here for pause this video here because I'm going to review the answer very shortly. Okay, how you guys are doing? Now let's see the answer. Okay, so sentence 1 is citation, right? A citation that should be included in the bibliography. The sentence 2, introduction, right? After reading the introduction, we know what this article is. Sentence 3, aims and research methods, right? We see the authors use data, right? So it's not empirical research, it's the researchers use data, so that we know. Organizational surveys, right? And that's one of the methodologies, the methods. And sentence 4 is the scope. How big is this research? How wide are they looking at? So they focus on assessing a range of pay structures, right? It's not the entire managerial structure, but more specifically pay structure. So we now understand a little bit more about this article. Sentence 5 is the usefulness, right? The article is useful to my research topic because they suggest that there are numerous reasons. So you see how the author of the annotation is reflecting and evaluating this source. Sentence 6, limitations, right? There's no books or no other research or articles are perfect. Maybe they have some strengths or weakness. So can you identify them? Can you put them in the words, right? What's missing or what's not so perfect, so good in this source? So you do evaluate, you point that out, right? Sentence 7, a conclusion about what you have just said in the previous sentences, and sentence 8, reflection. You can explain how this work illuminates your topic or how it will fit into your research, something like that. So after doing this, it will be a complete and a good annotation for an annotated bib. Next, let's talk about the general steps of making an annotated bib. This is not the universal steps. People might have different ways, but this is the route that I usually take if I'm going to do an annotated bib. So usually I start with some very general keyword search on Google or some other common research engines, even including Wikipedia. We don't usually accept Wikipedia as a legitimate source because we don't know who wrote those pages, but it can be some starting point for research. And also you can do keyword search in all the academic databases and the journals, right? You can go to JSTOR, Project Muse, Google Scholar, ProQuest, all that kind of a website. And you can also go to library, right? Literally, there are libraries in the city, in your campus, and you can go to there and find your book. And when you identify some source that you feel relevant and interested in, You read you read the abstract. You see what the article is about, what the book is about, and you see if they continue to interest you, right? If this item is you think, oh, this is interesting, this is relevant, so you read in more details, right? And you evaluate this source and then annotate. So first, you see now you have your first annotation on your annotated bibliography. And starting from there, if that's a scholarly source, there must be a bibliography or some footnotes or literature review in it. So you read those things and you see who else is in this conversation, and you follow the footnotes, you follow the bibliography entries, and you will ultimately start to find more things. You will find more sources that can be helpful. So starting from there, it's a more targeted search. It's more of you're trying to identify all the different players in this field, all the different researchers, maybe some other things that feed into the same conversation. So you started with some general common research and search engines, and you ended up with more specific and a more informed search for your journey. And also, we have put together a library and a research source across CUNY for different, within different campuses. So you can also scan this QR code and go to the website of that source and find many useful things I hope for to you. And there are some other things that we have to talk about in terms of the annotated bib. Sometimes you will hear your professor ask you to, you have to have 10 entries on this annotated bib, and 3 of them have to be primary source, and 5 of them have to be secondary source. So what is primary source and what is secondary source? Primary source are the immediate first-hand accounts of a topic from people who had a direct connection with it. It can come in many different ways, but sometimes, more often than not, the text of the laws, some original documents, newspaper reports by reporters who witnessed those events, or the quotation from the people who experienced that. Speeches, diaries, letters, and interviews, original research, data sets, survey data, some such as the census or economic statistics, photos, videos, audios that capture the event, artwork that you are examining. My discipline, I am a theater scholar, so for me the performance of the theater itself is primary for me. And also if a reporter go to a performance and just faithfully reported, like, when did the performance happen, how did it happen, who or the cast in the show, that's also primary for me. And the secondary are either popular or scholarly. We're going to talk about the difference between popular and scholarly in a minute. The secondary are the writings about the primary source. Okay, it's not the primary source themselves, but the conversation or the writings about the primary. It's one step further from the primary source. Sometimes they can be mostly books about the topic, analysis or interpretation of data, scholarly or other articles about a topic, especially by people who did not directly involve. Documentaries on commentaries on some certain topics. So basically, it's a conversation or the debate or the dialogues around this primary source. Let me give you guys an example or a simpler way to illustrate what is primary and what's secondary. I always use these examples. Say we're looking at a football game, right? And it's team A against the team B, and 2 students are debating about team A's performance in that football game. and student A is saying, oh, the team A played well, and student B is saying, no, the team A didn't play well. So in this conversation, the football game itself, either the live stream or the recording of the game, or the statistics, the stats about the game, they are the primary, the game itself. And the conversation, the opinion or the argument that student A and B are making are the secondary, right? In order to support their own statement, they have to go back to the primary, which is the game itself. Maybe they have to quote one moment in the game, maybe one specific play in the game, one specific throw in the play, whatever. The conversation, the opinion of team A playing well or not is the secondary. I hope this example can illustrate the difference between primary and secondary for you. Next, the different a set of terms that we talked in the previous slide: scholarly and popular. Okay, sometimes your professor also asked, will ask, you will have to have at least the three popular sources, at least the three scholarly sources. So what are they? Scholarly sources are written for highly qualified researchers, and the audience should have kind of education or kind of a credentials to be able to understand the writing. Usually the scholarly sources are peer-reviewed, which means before the publication goes into publication, a group of likewise expert, similarly credentialed and abled experts will look at the draft and approve its publication. So if you go to JSTOR, you'll find some scholarly books and academic journals. More often than not, they are scholarly. And popular sources, on the other hand, are written by and intended for a general audience. Okay, you don't have to have a PhD or a master to understand those popular sources. And before publication, they are not peer-reviewed. They are only maybe reviewed by the general editor or something. It can be, popular books and magazines and newspapers, websites, blogs. They can all be popular sources. Using the theater as an example again. So for me, one of the most useful and common popular source is theater reviews. For example, those ones published on New York Times. You don't have to have a PhD to read the New York Times theater reviews, right? So it's geared towards the general audience, and it's a secondary, right? It's not the performance itself. It's a conversation about the performance. So it's secondary and popular. Okay. So when you're trying to evaluate the source and see if it's scholarly or popular, I have a list of questions you can ask yourself on the left-hand side of the slides. So you can ask yourself, who is the intended audience, right? Does the author have academic credentials? Is it peer-reviewed? And some most obvious thing is if that's scholarly, usually it has a bibliography or a works cited page at the end of the source. So if it has it, very likely it will be a scholar. If it doesn't, very likely it will be a popular source. Okay. Okay. All right. I think at this point, you should have had a good idea about the annotated bib. How should we write it, and why should we write it? So at the end of this workshop, I have a practice. So you can follow this PowerPoint and follow the link, find this article, and write 4 sentences that summarize, evaluate, and reflect on the article, and see if you can write a good annotated bib entry. Okay, thank you for attending today's workshop. And we have a post-workshop survey to learn about your experience and your feedback of attending this. Okay, so please follow us, scan the QR code and go to the link and help us out to understand what can we offer more and how can we improve in the future. Thank you guys. All right, that's the end of this workshop. Thank you for viewing.